14 October 1957. Bonn. A senior judge signs a ruling under the emblem of the new Federal Republic. In his desk drawer, he keeps an old photograph of himself in a Nazi robe. Only the stamp on the verdict has changed, he writes. The law has not yet learned the difference between justice and obedience. He believes this is dangerous to write. He writes it anyway. He is careful, precise as always. He does not say it in public. His name is Karl H. Born, 1906, son of a schoolteacher in the Rhineland, educated in the law of the old republic and employed by the courts of the new dictatorship. His documents remain orderly even when the streets outside are not. The mathematics of his life is neat. 2 world wars bracket his youth, a handful of oaths and transfers, a trail of memoranda and clean signatures. The photograph in the drawer is from 1942. The robe is black and stiff. The eagle looks down. The eyes in the photograph do not blink. The signature beneath it is practiced. The stamp is round. The stamp says everything and nothing. 8 May 1945. Cologne. The sirens are silent. The smoke is not. The city is a field of bricks. Where the cathedral stands, the void around it describes a miracle in negative. Where Karl's apartment stood, the ground is a sink of ashes and glass. He returns with a suitcase to a street without houses and an address with no referent. He sees the women in scarves. They carry bricks in baskets. Later they will be called Trümmerfrauen. At the time they are unphotographed and unpaid. They pass him, eyes narrowed against the dust. There is a rhythm to their work, a pace, a mathematics of rubble. 1,000 bricks make a wall, 1,000 walls make a street, 1,000 streets make a city again. The numbers are beyond a man. A woman counts them anyway. Karl has a coat and a notebook. He writes down names of neighbors in small, tight script. He writes Hans, East Front. He writes Liesel, no word. He writes Father died, 29 April, week. He does not write his own guilt. He writes his job history in neutral verbs. He writes transferred, promoted, assigned. The sentences are as clean as his hands are not. 11 May 1945. Cologne City Hall. A notice in English and German, curfew at 19:09. No alcohol. Surrender firearms. Present identification on demand. An Allied occupation report notes that German civilians are subdued, hungry and compliant, and that attitudes are difficult to read. Fear of retribution is present, but masked by need for food. The notation is in blue pencil in a file that will eventually reside in a box labeled BAMARL11 in the Bundesarchiv. The handwriting is legible. The hunger is not. The mathematics of hunger is exact. It has numbers attached. Calorie rations fall to 1,000 calories per day in some months and for some citizens. Later, it will be called the Hunger Winter of 1946-47. At the time, it is simply winter. People boil nettles. They exchange clothes for potatoes. Cigarettes, more stable than paper money, become the currency of the black market. A pack of Chesterfields is a suit. A carton is a bicycle. Karl keeps a cigarette in his pocket, unlit, as a possible bribe. He does not smoke. He counts. A British military government officer visits the courthouse. The building is 12 rooms with 3 roofs. The files are damp. Many were burned. The clerk explains that some files burned because the roof was gone. Others burned because burning seems safer. The officer is polite. He mentions denazification. He says there will be questionnaires. Karl hears the word Spruchkammer for the first time in this context. He has argued before chambers of judges. He has not expected a chamber to judge him. June 1945. Düsseldorf. The Fragebogen arrives. It is long. There are dozens of questions. Name, date of birth, Party memberships, offices held, organizations joined, donations made, ranks achieved. There are slots for every hour of the past 12 years. The form carries a warning. False statements will be punished. The mathematics of the form is not moral. It is administrative. Karl begins to answer. He writes, joined NSRB, National Socialist Lawyers League, 1933. He writes, member NSDAB, 1937. He writes, Associate Judge, Sondergericht, Special Court, 1942-44. He hesitates. He writes, assigned to political criminal matters under the strictures of the law. He does not write the names of the people before him. He does not write Wehrkraftzersetzung, though he remembers saying it. He does not write death, though he remembers signing it. An Allied intelligence summary from July 1945 notes that special courts were responsible for the suppression of dissent and the enforcement of wartime decrees, and that personnel assigned to such courts must be considered carefully. The summary is unemotional. It recommends screening and, where necessary, removal. It also recommends speed. The courts must run. Contracts must be enforced. Rations must be adjudicated. The mathematics of priorities is unforgiving. Karl is required to produce affidavits. Persilschein, whitewashing certificates, will become a term of art. He obtains one from a neighbor whose husband had been imprisoned for listening to foreign radio. He had commuted the sentence, he reminds himself, in that case. In that case, he had found a way to call it not defeatism, but curiosity. In that case, he writes, he acted with caution to minimize harm. He obtains another affidavit from a city physician whose son had been sentenced to forced labor. The sentence had been light, he suggests, compared to others. The doctor signs, eyes averted. In the denazification files, the classification scheme is clear. Major offenders, Hauptschuldige. Offenders, belastet. Lesser offenders, minder belastet. Followers, Mitläufer. Exonerated, entlastet. 5 boxes to place millions of lives. On paper, the mathematics of guilt looks feasible. The reality is porous. There are at least 13 million Fragebogen filled across Germany. Only a fraction are followed by hearings. The Spruchkammern are staffed, in part, by the same trained legal minds who were members of the party. Often, there are simply not enough clean hands to lift the weight. A Spruchkammer hearing requires documents, witnesses, memory. The witnesses are missing or hungry. The documents burned. The memories are cautious. Karl appears before a Spruchkammer in August 1946. The chairman has a moustache and a tremor. He has been a judge since before Hitler and will be a judge after him. The questions are controlled. Were you ever a member of the SS? No. Did you impose a death sentence? He hesitates. The answer is not straightforward. He imposed a sentence. Others watched it carried out. He says, I participated in the application of sentences prescribed by law. The words are like polished stones. The minutes, in a file later accessioned as NW 52308 in the Landesarchiv, say, the accused emphasizes he was a jurist bound by statute. The word bound appears twice. The chairman notes that reconstruction requires trained personnel. He notes that the accused has shown remorse in affidavits. He notes that evidence of zealousness is lacking. The file ends with a stamp. The stamp is everything. The stamp says, Mitläufer. Follower. A fine is imposed. He pays it with cigarettes. The mathematics of denazification is neither pure nor entirely cynical. It is a calculation of scarcity. The Allied zones need administrators. The courts need judges. The population needs verdicts on rations, divorce, property, tenancy. The special chambers produce statistics and category tables. Out of 3.6 million cases in the US zone, fewer than 1% are classified as major offenders. Roughly half are followers or exonerated. By 1948, most cases end in small fines or probation. The files go back into cabinets or into fires. The cabinets smell of damp paper. The fires smell of something else. Meanwhile, the arithmetic of the street is simple. It counts potatoes and coal. In the winter of 1946–47, the coal trains are late. British occupation reports from the North Rhine note that mines are flooded and rails are iced. The temperatures fall. The caloric intake drops below 1,000 for many. In Cologne, a woman collapses while carrying bricks. She is taken to a clinic with no heat. The doctor writes exhaustion, malnutrition. He signs with a pen that stops scratching, then resumes. He is careful to write clearly. He has no medicine to offer clarity. In kitchens across the American and British zones, people put their gold on the table and get less for it than they would have imagined, and more than they imagined they would have traded for a sack of flour. Cigarettes are money because Americans have them and because they burn evenly. Police logs record arrests for theft from coal cars. The black market corridors in Frankfurt run from the Hauptbahnhof down toward the river. The police know the flow. They police it and also join it. The Economist in Munich writes, "The mathematics of scarcity makes liars of honest men." He dies in January 1947. The ledger remains. Between 1945 and 1947, trains deliver a different cargo. People. Families and fragments from Silesia, East Prussia, Pomerania, and the Sudetenland. Expellees and refugees. They arrive in western towns already broken. They are gaunt and defensive. They carry trunks and grievances. The statistics mount like luggage. 12 to 14 million Germans are expelled from the East. Millions cross into what will become the Federal Republic. Into rooms already taken. Into workplaces. Into shops without goods. Karl's sister-in-law and her 2 children arrive from Danzig in March 1946. They bring with them a suitcase with a broken handle, an infant's dress, 2 silver spoons wrapped in cloth, and a story she will not tell. The municipal housing office assigns them half a room in a house that already has 3 families. The wall is hung with a curtain. The curtain is a boundary. It is also tissue. Tensions are immediate. The locals are tired of hunger. The expellees are tired of contempt. The arithmetic of scarce roofs is cruel. Every night, noise on the stairwell. Every morning, new rules about the stove. A police report from June 1946 in a town near Kassel reads, "Altercation between local party member's widow and refugee family over access to shared courtyard. No serious injuries. Complaint withdrawn. General tension remains." The phrase "general tension remains" will repeat like a metronome for years. There is a DP camp a few kilometers away. Displaced persons. Jews from Poland and the Baltic, forced laborers from Ukraine, POWs who do not want to return or cannot. The camp is at the edge of town. In the former Wehrmacht barracks, there is a fence. There are guard towers now looking out from the wrong side. Allied occupation reports say German populace should be made to see. Some are made to see. Many look away. In 1945, American GIs take German townspeople to the edge of Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen. Photographs survive, women in scarves walking among the dead. Other people in other towns do not go anywhere. They read notices on boards. They see pictures in foreign papers. They avoid the eyes of those behind the fence near the station. Karl passes the DP camp whenever he goes to a courthouse in a neighboring town. He looks and does not. In his notebook, he writes, "Camps. People inside are waiting to go somewhere else. People outside are learning to stay." He underlines learning. The immediate post-war trials are far away. Nuremberg has judges in black robes, interpreters, microphones, and a courthouse rebuilt with American wood and German masons' hands. It has a ring of cameras. The German legal journals report the sentences with minimal commentary. In courts across the zones, smaller trials proceed: doctors, camp guards, industrialists. The particulars are complicated. The legal categories are brittle. The European combination of penal codes and moral shocks makes for awkward arithmetic. Gustav Radbruch, the pre-Nazi Minister of Justice, writes in 1946 that there is a point where statutory law yields to justice. The Radbruch formula becomes a provocation. Extreme injustice is not law, and when the conflict between justice and the letter of the law reaches an unbearable degree, justice must prevail. Most judges do not apply it. Most judges have lived by the other formula. The formula that says law is what is promulgated, stamped, and signed. The formula whose comfort is that obedience is a virtue. The courts of Cologne and Dusseldorf need men and women with law degrees. Many of those degrees were earned before 1933 and after. Many of those hands signed away lives and livelihoods. The denazification panels become administrative triage stations. Karl returns to a court, first provisionally in 1947. He handles property disputes. He handles small criminal offences: theft of coal, black market fraud, and assault in a ration queue. He writes opinions like he always did: narrow, textual, careful. He has a new superior who knows his file. The superior keeps the file in a drawer with others. The drawer opens and closes. The superior does not say a word. He writes a note in the margin of a transfer request: useful, no zeal. No zeal is currency in 1947. 20. June 1948. The currency reform. New money, Deutsche Mark. New prices on shop windows overnight. The black market stalls collapse like cardboard. People stand in front of stores at daybreak and watch as goods carried in from the back are placed on shelves with prices that seem both high and miraculous. A woman buys butter for the first time in years and eats it with a spoon. She does not sleep that night. The arithmetic of pretense ends. A new arithmetic begins. The Marshall Plan quiets hunger with ships disgorging wheat and powdered milk, and accelerates reconstruction with steel and credits. But it is also a discipline. There will be reporting. There will be audits. There will be quotas. The American occupation authorities demand reforms. German administrators, technicians, and jurists produce a stream of compliance and negotiation. The Bundesarchiv holds procurement lists that read like instructions for rebuilding a civilization: generators, lathes, ball bearings, and 1,000 paper clips. In a city office in Cologne, Karl is seconded to a department that regulates tenancy and property claims. He reads petitions from people whose houses were bombed and whose neighbors built new extensions onto the ruins. He writes, "The mathematics of ruins distorts lines on maps." He writes decisions that return rooms, authorize extra rations for families of 5, and deny claims made on the same address by 2 cousins who speak with different accents and both have papers. He learns to listen to angers hardened by the road west. He tells himself that legal order stabilizes the past by drawing lines through it. 1949. The Federal Republic of Germany is proclaimed. The Basic Law is printed. It is careful and spare. It uses the word dignity in its first article and never lets go. A new court opens in Karlsruhe. The Constitutional Court speaks a language half moral and half procedural. It begins to define what it means to be citizens again. But below it, the ordinary courts are filled with familiar faces. The staffing of the new Ministry of Justice begins in Bonn. A future file, compiled in the 2000s and placed in the Bundesarchiv under a project called the Rosenberg Study, will describe that a majority of leading ministerial officials joined the NSDAP before 1945, that many had worked in the Reich Ministry of Justice, and that networks of old colleagues reasserted a culture of formalism and early loyalty to the new state. The documents are careful. They analyze careers with the tone of accountancy. The mathematics is arithmetic of biography, dates, transfers, memos, promotions, and a statistical weighting of guilt. 1951. The law for the regulation of the legal status of persons, falling under Article 31 of the Basic Law, passes the Bundestag. The colloquial name is Artikel 131 Gesetz. It regularizes reinstatement for former civil servants and soldiers of the Nazi era who lost their positions. It is a compromise between legal continuity and political necessity. It is also a door. Many enter. Karl becomes a judge at the Oberlandesgericht in 1951. He has a robe. It is not the same as the one in the drawer. He does not wear the eagle. He wears the federal emblem, a restrained eagle, different wings. The courtroom has a smell of new varnish. The Constitution is on the wall. The benches are repaired. The files are full. He hears cases that train him in the logic of the 1950s. One case concerns a former mayor who had signed deportation orders for Jewish citizens. The question is whether he committed murder or was an accessory. The criminal code requires intent for murder. For accessory, the statutes of limitations apply. The court hears testimony. The mayor's lawyer, a man who had once prosecuted saboteurs, argues that his client believed he was obeying the law and that he had no power to disobey. The court issues a judgment in 1952. Accessory statute of limitations expired. There is a footnote. Radbruch cannot apply here. The law has chosen obedience. The mathematics is simple, a line of code, a clock. 1952. The Lastenausgleichsgesetz passes, the Equalization of Burdens Act. It distributes money from those with remaining property to those who lost everything in the East. It is imperfect and resented by both sides. It is, however, an arithmetic that acknowledges the fact of loss officially. The files are extraordinary. Lists of furniture, hectares of land, pigs, harnesses, wheat. In their bureaucratic detail, they preserve a rural world that has vanished. Karl reads one file aloud to himself in the evening once and tells himself that enumeration is also a kind of mourning. In schools, new textbooks arrive. They are cautious. They mention Hitler and war. But the chapters on the years 1933–45 are shorter than those on the Holy Roman Empire. The photographs show broken bridges and burned houses. They do not show the people who were sent away. There are exceptions. In a gymnasium in Frankfurt, a teacher shows photographs from Buchenwald. A boy faints. The teacher receives a reprimand. The arithmetic of memory subtracts more than it adds. 1953. The Korean war boom sends orders into German factories. Procurement rises. Unemployment falls. A Ford plant in Cologne hires again. Karl watches from the window of his apartment as men in caps bicycle to morning shifts. The city is louder. The rubble hills at the edge of town are quieted with grass. A modernist church is built on a corner where 4 streets were wiped away. Its bell is tuned to a major key. The sermons are about future and sin in abstract. The past is the subject of funerals and elections. In those years, the police watched the left. The Communist Party is banned in 1956 by the Constitutional Court as a danger to the free democratic basic order. Judges who were cautious in interpreting crimes of the old regime are energetic in punishing those who oppose the new. The mathematics of politics has flipped, but the algorithm is familiar. It rewards obedience to the statute and suspicion of the dissenter. Karl hears a case in 1955 in which a union organizer is accused of passing information to a radio station in East Berlin. The sentence is severe. The legal reasoning is tight. The past remains in the drawer. He is not a cynic. He performs his duties. He believes in order. He believes more and more that the basic law is a bulwark against new orders, even while it is built with the hands of the old. He accepts that this is the price of the present. 1957. He writes the sentence in his notebook. Only the stamp on the verdict has changed. The law has not yet learned the difference between justice and obedience. He writes it after drafting a decision that applies a statute inherited from the Reich Criminal Code because the Bundestag has not yet replaced it. He writes it because that day he sees the old photograph in the drawer when searching for a paper. He writes it and then writes it again to make the letters smooth. He is not alone. In a Karlsruhe courtroom, a judge named Hermann Weinkopf, the first president of the Federal Court of Justice, will write essays arguing that the judges of the Third Reich were bound by the law of their time and that their guilt must be distinguished from the guilt of political leaders. In ministerial offices in Bonn, men like Eduard Dreher, a former prosecutor from Italy, will shape commentaries on the criminal code that define murder narrowly and accessory broadly, and thus confine the possibilities of punishment. Their handwriting is precise. Their footnotes are numerous. They believe they are serving continuity. At the same time, other men serve another mathematics. Fritz Bauer, a Jewish social democrat who fled and returned, becomes Hesse's attorney general. He sees the law as an instrument that must remember and punish. He pushes open the archive doors where the ledgers of mass murder are kept. He fights jurisdictional skepticism and ministerial indifference, and he sends a report to Israel that will help locate Adolf Eichmann in Buenos Aires. He does this in a legal culture where many call him a troublemaker. Allies in his office bring him files late at night. He reads them, and sometimes, because he knows where the lines are, leaves nothing written. In the West German press, the word that repeats is Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with the past. It sounds like a project and like a prayer. In 1957, a poll shows that a majority of West Germans would like to draw a line under the past. In churches, pastors preach reconciliation. In living rooms, wives ask their husbands questions they do not have the grammar to answer. The children, born into shelves of bread and new radios, learn phrases like, "in those days." Meanwhile, across the country, there are camps still occupied. DP camps become housing for expellees, then student dormitories, then modern suburbs. The fences come down. The arithmetic of distance shortens. Everything that was somewhere else is now near. In small towns, the graveyards of the local Jewish communities remain. Stones tilted, letters Hebrew and blackened, fences rusted. In big cities, memorials go up to the bombed in and the fallen. The inscriptions emphasize suffering and survival. The perpetrators and the neighbors remain absent from stone. In court opinions of the 1950s, the logic of legality is pure. Judges interpret laws minimally to avoid retroactivity. They insist that punishing the past must not violate the formal guarantees of the present. It is a noble instinct. It is also an escape. The mathematics of guilt calculated in such a way leaves most of the arithmetic to others, to historians in archives, to teachers in classrooms, to sons and daughters at kitchen tables. 1959. Karl is elevated to a federal court. The letter arrives with a federal seal. He keeps it with the worn photograph he never shows anyone. He is asked to rule on cases involving pensions for former SS members. He reads memos arguing that pensions cannot be withheld for actions that were legal at the time. He reads voices in the press calling this obscene. He writes a decision that splits the difference, pensions for those who were conscripts, not for those who were volunteers. He writes it carefully. He thinks about the man in the photograph. He wonders what category he would fall into if judged by himself. 1961. Berlin is cut in two. The Cold War becomes brick and barbed wire. The mathematics of permission changes again. In West Germany, the state hardens against the East. Laws are passed, strengthening internal security. The vigilance against leftist dissent is redoubled. Former Nazis sit in offices that protect democracy from dictatorship. The irony is not invisible. It is simply accepted as part of the price. 1963. The first Frankfurt Auschwitz trial begins. Fritz Bauer has pulled it into being with wire and willpower. Survivors travel from Israel and America to testify. Young listeners fill the benches. For many, it is the first time they hear the names of camps as facts, rather than rumors or foreign propaganda. The newspapers put transcripts on their front pages. The trial's arithmetic is granular: block numbers, room dimensions, per gas chamber capacity, dates of transports, names on lists. It is also granular in the other sense, sand-like, hard to grasp in handfuls. Carl reads the coverage at breakfast, and in chambers he hears a case concerning a guard at a local Gestapo prison who now seeks reinstatement of civil service rank. The file contains an old report, a recent affidavit, and a letter from a survivor who lives now in Canada. The survivor writes, "He was there. He kicked me." The judge must decide whether there is enough for a finding of base motives under the murder statute, which would avoid a statute of limitations. The court finds that there is not. The judge writes, "We cannot convict on the basis of emotion." He closes the file. He goes home. He does not sleep well. 1965. The Bundestag debates the statute of limitations on murder. Georgie letters arrive from the East. The nation decides to extend it. The arithmetic of time is not neutral. A murder is now a crime that can still be prosecuted. Accessory to murder remains limited. Prosecutors are thrown back on intent. The courts apply intent carefully. The number of convictions remains small. In 1966, a small book appears by a political scientist who was once a soldier. It argues that the economic miracle was built on silence, that wages and votes were exchanged for forgetting, that the Cold War provided a shape into which the old administrative elites could pour their skills without pausing to look at the stain on their hands. It is a book of polite anger. It makes little difference in the courts. 1968. The student movement on the streets. Demonstrations in Frankfurt and Berlin. The young demand answers from the old. They ask their professors where they were. They ask their parents what they did. They ask the justice ministers how many of their colleagues had wartime ranks. They change the mathematics of conversation. There are sit-ins at universities. Lectures are interrupted. Seminar rooms become tribunals. Judges notice the tone. It is not respectful. It is also not wrong. In the ministries, a man named Eduard the Weher, who once prosecuted partisans, helps draft changes to the criminal code. A later generation of historians will argue that some of the changes had the effect of making it more difficult to prosecute Nazi crimes as murder. The defenders will say that the legal modernization was overdue. The files are detailed. They show, again, systems working within themselves, disciplined by internal logics. The mathematics keeps its lines. It does not know what to do with tears. 1970. Willy Brandt kneels in Warsaw. The photograph is a statement of repentance performed by a man who did not personally need to repent. It ricochets through German households like a whisper. In some, people cry. In others, they scoff. In Karl's notebook, he writes, "Gesture can be judgment." He writes, Silence can be sentence. He writes, silence can be sentence. He writes again, stamp. In the meantime, the office of the federal judge is tidy. The portrait of the president hangs on the wall. The old photograph remains in the drawer. There is a locked cabinet with 3 files that he keeps separate. He has his reasons. In the top of these files is a typed report from 1943 concerning a sentence he pronounced on a factory worker who had said, during a break, that the Führer must be mad to think he could win against the Russians. He had read it in a complaint letter from a foreman. He had said, at the time, in the reasoning, that the statement threatened the war effort. He had sentenced the man to prison. The man had died there. He keeps the file. He cannot throw it away. He cannot bring it forward. The mathematics of guilt is not done. It is a ledger that cannot be closed because there is always an entry that was never recorded. The Spruchkammern gave him a stamp. The stamp defined him. The basic law gave him a role. The role confined him. He is an instrument of a state that preserves continuity to create a difference. He understands this. He doubts it. He lives anyway. His son asks him in 1972 where he was in 1942. The son is an engineering student in Aachen. He has hair to his shoulders. He says, "We know these things now." Karl says, "I was in court." He says, "It was law." He says, "It is complicated." The conversation ends with an embrace that feels like an exchange of documents. In municipal councils, the late 1970s bring debates over street names. A street named for a former mayor with a past. A square named for a jurist known abroad for an opinion. Citizens, younger ones especially, argue that these honors are stains. Older ones argue that it is in bad taste to relitigate. A compromise is reached. A plaque is installed. It explains in neutral language that a past existed. People hurry by and do not read it. A kid on a skateboard scrapes the edge of the plaque with the steel of his trucks, not reading it, and accidentally defacing it while simply being alive. The economics of the country are stable. The factories hum. The social state is thick. Pensioners sit in sunlit cafes. The bomb sites are plazas with fountains. The rubble women are now old women with grandsons in the army of NATO. The DP camps are no longer camps. They are neighborhoods with hedges. In the center of Cologne, a synagogue is rebuilt. A federal president attends. He says the word guilt. He says it slowly, as if it were in Latin. The courts continue their work. They rule on nuclear plants, strikes, pornography, road noise. The cases of the past ebb. Those that remain are pushed by younger prosecutors. There are successes. There are files closed with finality. The arithmetic of justice moves in inches. At night, Karl sits at his desk and rereads a slim book someone sent him, a collection of testimonies from a camp near Lublin. He reads it as a citizen. He reads it as a judge. He reads it as a man who signed papers with stamps that ended lives. He writes on the back flyleaf, "We thought that law was a machine that moved on tracks laid down by the legislators. We did not see that the machine itself is a choice." He underlines machine itself is a choice. He circles choice. He remembers the semesters in Heidelberg in 1927 when he learned Roman law. He remembers the lectures in Cologne in 1933 where the same professors who clucked their tongues at disorder explained that the new state needed new order. He remembers how easy it was to translate obedience into a virtue. He remembers that it was not the only way. He has kept, too, a clipping about a Hamburg judge named Hans Filbinger, who had been a Navy judge during the war and who, in 1978, resigns as minister-president after it is revealed that he had signed death sentences late in the war and had said, "What was law then cannot be injustice today." The sentence is harder than any stamp. When Karl reads it, he feels a stinging in his face. He writes in his notebook, I could have said it. I did not. I thought it. I know better now. A historian visits him once, in 1979, to ask about the special court. She carries a tape recorder and a quiet confidence. He is courteous. He makes coffee. He answers minimally. He says, I do not remember. He says, we were bound. He says, it is malleable memory. He declines to be recorded. He offers her files he thinks are harmless. He does not offer the 3 files in the cabinet. He writes later that he regrets this. He does not send them. They remain in the cabinet, which will eventually be inherited by his daughter, who will eventually deliver them to the city archives, where a young archivist will open them with a feeling that is part reverence, part nausea. He retires in 1976. The ceremony is modest. Speeches are made about service and stability. A colleague quotes Montesquieu. There is cake. He does not show anyone the photograph in the drawer. He takes it home and places it in a folder marked personal. He dreams sometimes of the courthouse of 1942, the polish of the floors, the sound of boots in the corridor, the sound of boots in the corridor, the smell of paper.